Hello and welcome to the Affidea podcast. I'm Al Dunn. We're talking to Dr. Dave Foley from Affidea. It's Men's Health Week. First question, Dave, an obvious one. Are men good at looking after themselves?
I think the answer to that, Al, would probably be no, because I don't think any of us are good at looking after each other. And it depends what metric you want to use for trying to decide whether we're healthy or not. But if you just look at the statistics and look around you in everyday life, there's a lot of people with obesity, increasing numbers of diabetics, people with chronic diseases, and people dying younger now than they did ever before. So whether it's a man or a woman, I don't think we're good at looking after ourselves, no.
Well, it's Men's Health Week in particular, so I suppose we're talking about men. Or put it another way, are women better at looking after themselves than men?
I think women are probably better communicators. I think they probably network better. I think they're probably discuss matters better. I don't think men are as comfortable at that. That might be changing in terms of current generations, but certainly my father wouldn't have been a man in that generation who'd be comfortable speaking about medical issues. I think the thinking was then you'd go to the doctor if you had a problem. You certainly wouldn't be thinking about prevention, and there would be some topics that you'd have found uncomfortable about mentioning or discussing amongst peers, friends, colleagues, and even to a certain extent GPs. So I think on balance, it's slightly cliched, but I think men are probably worse than women at engaging in health. It comes back to the whole notion of prevention. I mean, we know what we're going to die from, you and I, Al. It's the same combination of cardiovascular disease, which is just a fancy word for strokes and heart attacks, and cancers. It's not a mystery to us. So if you know in advance, and the mortality statistics suggest that we're probably going to run into trouble somewhere in our early to mid 70s, then at 30 years of age, you wouldn't expect people to be going to the doctor. If you look at that generation 0 to 35, I have it notionally broken up into kind of three age brackets: 0 to 35, 35 to 50, and over 50. So the 0 to 35s on paper look good. They haven't been to the doctor. They don't have chronic diseases. They mightn't even have a GP. So yes, they are the group that think to themselves that they're invulnerable. However, they live in an environment that is slowly trying to kill them. Their diets are high in animal protein, fat, saturated fats, sugars. They have a sedentary lifestyle. They're exposed to chronic emotional stressors, and they don't have the social networks that our parents and grandparents certainly would have had. So even though on paper they look good and they haven't been near the medical profession, they're slowly living in an environment which is a setup for failure. You take the next age group up, that 35 to 50 group you mentioned, they're probably thinking to themselves, they probably haven't got much in the way of medical diseases yet. However, they're at peak responsibility. They're time starved. They probably have jobs that are reaching peak professional financial responsibilities. They might have mortgages and families. And if they're lucky enough to have older parents, that might be becoming frailer and iller. So their demands and their time are extensive. And what gets lost there is time for their own health and thinking about it. So those people who haven't been near the medical profession inside 7 or 8 years, they're fooling themselves because they're living in an environment which is slowly eroding their health and they're not aware of it. And by the time they become aware of it, chronic diseases will have already been established.
Early detection is good, obviously. Is there anything we should be looking out for as men in particular?
Okay, so let's take cancers. Have you any idea off the top of your head, what are the top 4 cancers that affect men? Have a guess.
Well, I presume prostate cancer is in there?
Top of the list. So prostate, bowel, lung, melanoma. They're your top 4. So if you think about those for a second, if you think about how you might screen or prevent or think about, and awareness of the symptoms is a help. So you can, if you go through lung cancer, you might be thinking about coughing up blood, persistent cough, breathlessness. If you're talking about bowel cancer, it's change in bowel habit, bleeding, weight loss, unexplained, unintentional weight loss. Prostate, you can have urinary symptoms, increasing frequency of urination. The problem with that is a lot of that overlaps with just a benign overgrowth of the prostate that happens in men as they get older anyway. Mm-hmm. And skin changes, you're looking for moles that are changing in color or size or symptoms. So they're the symptoms you might be looking for. There are some screening tests available. So you can look to go for bowel check that the government will offer, which is a screening test for colonoscopies or bowel check or FOBs. You can have regular examinations, but a lot of these diseases, it isn't easy to screen for, and you have symptoms, and then you're into the disease. So the prevention is often better than thinking about early detection.
So, what can we do, for example, to prevent bowel cancer?
When I started out in medicine, I used to think that all of these diseases had separate causes. So blood pressure was different than bowel cancer and different than heart attacks and strokes. But the mechanisms for all of those diseases are similar. And the nice thing about it is the preventative arms to prevent these diseases are all very similar. If you boil it back to diet and exercise, Al, which sounds very generic, but you will reduce all of these diseases: blood pressure, diabetes, bowel cancer, prostate cancer. So if I had an ask today for men's and for men's health, it would be to think about diet. In particular, whole food, plant-based diets.
So, are you saying, Dave, you'd like us all to be vegans or vegetarians?
Yes, I'd love you all to be vegetarians, because the evidence is in now. This isn't a matter of me wondering about nettle oils and turmeric. The evidence is there. It's been there for 20 years. That people who adopt a whole food plant-based diet, which is close to a vegetarian diet, they prevent disease, they live longer, healthier, happier lives. So what's stopping us from doing that? Well, what's stopping us is sometimes a lack of information, a lack of knowledge. We don't understand. We have old-fashioned notions that assume that animal protein is good for us. You have to drink plenty of milk to have strong bones. You have to eat big steaks and plenty of meat to be strong and run around GAA pitches. These are old-fashioned notions that have been disabused now. You can get all the protein you need from plant-based foods.
But Dave, animal foods are nice.
I see what you've done there. Yes, Al.
You see?
I hadn't thought this through. Yes. Well, think about this. I would agree with you that if you went out to a restaurant in the 1980s, your options for vegetarian food wouldn't have been all that nice.
Yeah.
But that's changed. And I think if you look now at a lovely salad that you can eat, and you can have lots of pomegranates and various colors of peppers and chilies, it does taste nice. We're hardwired to look for that dopamine hit off those fast foods that do taste nice. They give us a little bit of a feeling of wellness and satiety. But your taste buds change every 2 or 3 weeks. You get used to a new diet. You get used to different shades of milk. So if you stick with it, you'll feel better. All of this is predicated upon the notion that it has to work for you and feel better. If you don't feel better, you won't do it. So I would challenge you, if I said, if you gave me 3 or 4 weeks of a whole food plant-based diet and you exercised every day, I guarantee you'd feel better at the end of that 3 or 4 weeks. And it's that'll keep you coming back to doing it and sustaining it.
You make a convincing argument, but you're not going to convince everybody. Is there a way to start this, to maybe eat more fish, or to have 1 day a week where you don't eat fish and you don't eat meat?
I'd agree with you. This blanket binary, all or nothing, doesn't work. All I'm saying to you is that the whole food plant-based diet should be your North Star. And however you want to get there and however long it takes, that's fine. As long as you understand that if you're slowly moving towards that, you're slowly moving away from chronic diseases. So yes, people, I'm not going to fight you for a steak once a month or every 6 weeks or once a week. If you understand that most of the time you're winning on the meals. So if you started your day with a breakfast that was whole grain porridge with fruit, and for lunch you had a lovely big salad with lots of the colours of the rainbow on it, and for dinner you might have a vegetarian lasagna. If you can slowly do that, then fine. Have a Friday takeaway. Have a steak once every 2 weeks. So it's not all or nothing. And one of the problems with diets is people get depressed and kind of throw it all up in the air when they miss a meal or they're under stress and they go, well, what's the point? But the point is small habits. Start small. You're exactly right. So do one small thing every day that's sustainable and try to build and build and build on that.
Well, let's look at skin cancer. Can diet have any effect on that?
Vitamin D has been shown, in particular in melanoma, to keep the melanomas smaller for longer. But in general, the evidence from diets now certainly sustain to bowel cancers, GI cancers in general. We know that in environmental cases, it's sunblock for melanomas would be your biggest irradiation risk. So certain cancers have certain specific ones. There are certain general cancers, breast cancer, the GI cancers, prostate cancer, that overwhelmingly link to diet as a major influencer on outcomes.
So with the 4 main cancers, with 3 of them anyway, diet can have a good effect on it. I presume for skin cancer, the main thing you can do is just stay out of the sun.
Yes, and for smoking and for lung cancer, it's smoking. But there are some cancers that are certain straightforward ones, but as a blanket, good diet, regular exercise, the two biggest determinants of outcomes.
Just before we finish up, I suppose it's easy enough to say men should have a healthier lifestyle. Are there any small things that we can do which would have an immediate effect?
Yes. Think about the diet that I spoke to you about. That's probably the biggest single thing you can do. The second thing you could do is think about exercise. We're looking for, the evidence shows, about 150 minutes per week of aerobic exercise is where we should be aiming for. And I'd like somebody to exercise, do something every day. It can be a walk, it can be a run, it can be a swim, it can be a cycle, but every day. So exercise isn't an optional extra. And again, the key is to find something you enjoy and do it. And better than that, if you can find sort of exercise that gives you some society, some interaction, builds bridges and connections, that's even better again. So solitary exercise is fine, I'll take that. But if you can play a game of doubles tennis, if you can play a round of golf, if you can engage with other people and society and build bridges, that's even better. Because the evidence shows that, particularly for men, isolation and being lonely in older age, they're big determinants of outcomes, wellness, and longevity. The people who live longest are the people with the best social connections, the best community connections, people who are engaged. And that's suddenly not going to happen when you're 75 years of age. So you need to think beforehand about, your network, your community, your engagements, and start planning for that now so that you have those networks when you're older.
Dr. Dave Foley from Affidea, thank you for joining us today. I think that was very useful and very informative for Men's Health Week. We'll see you next time.